topic of our session is the integration of GraphQL and Design Systems. My name is Ruben. I work at Toast. I'm the customer experience architect, so I oversee the architecture of all experience across mobile and web.
Yeah, my name's Alan Quigley. I'm a kind of front-end architect. I worry a lot about developer experience, the design system, front-end architecture, and sort of like the dev tools around GraphQL.
Now, let's start to talk about what Toast is. Toast is an all-in-one platform, and it's the best all-in-one platform for restaurants that there is. You might recognize this. You go to your local coffee shop, you order your coffee, or you go out with your friend, and you take the order, and the waiter is taking the order on a tablet. 9 out of 10, that will be Toast. And we serve in the US, Canada, the UK, and Ireland. But Toast is not just for guest-facing products. We built all-in-one. So we have kitchen management, online ordering, catering and events, team management, scheduling, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we talk about our mission is really to empower the restaurant community to delight their guests, do what they love, and thrive.
Cool. So I'm gonna start with a little kind of personal story. This restaurant here, the photo, this is a place called Variety Jones. So during the summer, I was celebrating my 12th wedding anniversary. So this is where we went to this restaurant, and it was amazing. Food was gorgeous. It wasn't fancy. The plates were just really simple, but it was amazing. We had a really good experience. The restaurant itself has 12 tables. It's got like a 4-man kitchen. It's quite small. It's run by 2 brothers. This is one of them, Aaron and Keelan Higgs. But since 2019, they've managed to hold on to a Michelin star, which is like really impressive for a very small restaurant. And I think they've done that because they've just had a really simple menu that they do really, really well. So what actually makes a restaurant great, right? It's a hard question because a good restaurant is often, it's the fact that it is unique, that makes it special. But in the restaurant industry, there's a concept. It's called mise en place. It's a French term that means putting in place, and it's essentially all of the preparation work you need to do before you start cooking. So it's like you're preparing all of your ingredients, planning everything you do, right? It's because when service starts, like you can't go and like start cutting something. You can't go and find new ingredients. Like you have to be prepared because it's like you have to serve food to people, and 10 minutes is a huge amount of time. So this is kind of a good representation of mise en place. Like you've got your ingredients, you've got your workspace organized, you've got your menu, your lists, your prep. All of the things you need to do to be ready to cook. And we're kind of the same when we're building products. The better prepared we are, the more, we have our design system components, we have our GraphQL types and entities, we have our workstations organized, we have our Figma designs, and you can see all this here. So there's a very similar concept here between the two. Ruben.
So let's take Alan's analogy and apply it on an example. So for this presentation, we created a new little product feature in our application for a chef to maintain a checklist and a task list of what they want to do. We're very agile, and we planned this feature, and we're like, great, we need to create the schema, we need to create a checklist, the UI, then we're going to bring it all together, and then we're going to release on time, right? Simple, that's how we start. But as many projects, things happen along the way. We extended an entity, but it actually didn't match in the federated graph. Or I provided the UI to Alan, but Alan's like, wait a minute, this doesn't work for my UI. Something needs to change in my schema. And we might have a dependency on another API that we thought they had all the fields and all the things we needed, but it ended up actually not having those. So we had to go back, we had to work with these teams. And the more and more that we have these unexpected things, the more our ship on time is moving down the line. And I'm sure everybody in the room has seen that kind of interruption. So by having our mise en place not en place, it's not in place, unknowns are not detected early in the process. Those interruptions, they happen later, and that leads to unexpected work, rework, but the most important thing is, because of that, we can't bring value to our customer fast enough. So we end up having our amazing feature we thought we were going to ship in 2 weeks, 2 months later, still in a crunch and trying to ship that.
So how can we solve for this? So we put this tool together, right? This is called PrepStation. It's, this is a nice title. It's in mise en place for product development. It is basically a mocked local gateway instance, and it integrates with Storybook to create like a shareable space for building the feature. Building the feature outside of the main architecture. I'll be honest, we did very little of the work. The guys from the guild here have kind of deserved probably most of the credit. It uses Hive as a source of truth. The local subgraph setup is using Yoga. We've got Storybook. Then if you think about how it works, we've got our back-end engineers, front-end engineers, and designers all work together in this space. We connect our Storybook, and we can basically build prototypes really fast. We can design schemas at the same time, and we get this really good feedback loop that we're building the product, and we're releasing a Storybook website to our stakeholders. And as we get into the later stages, we can put that in front of customers as well. So we can get feedback before we do any actual, work in the main system. The other really important thing is it creates a really good space for our design system to thrive. One of the challenges with the design system is contributions. When you've got a front-end engineer who is working at the end of a process, quite often the design system contribution will be the first thing that gets cut from the process. So moving the front-end engineer back to the start of the process, getting them to build the UI at that point is really valuable. It buys them time to identify new design system components early, and they've got the time later in the process to deliver that component. So how do we set this up? Pretty straightforward. Yarn prep setup. It's an Oak Cliff app, so just most of this stuff comes out of the box. We create a local workspace package, Yarn workspace package. That just gives us a place to store all of our kind of local files, and then we have a little prepstation.yaml file which uses Cosmic config, so we can store configuration between projects. When we start it up, Yarn prep start, it looks like this. So you can see this is a mock. This isn't our gateway. This is just a little mock gateway we put together. It spins up subgraphs, and we have our gateway. So these are all just images. I didn't decide to do a full live one, but we can do that. But here we go. Chef, we got our data. So this works. Next, we're going to look at this. This is our little prep list component we're going to look through. Like, this is just to show an example of how this works. Classic to-do list. So let's design the checklist schema. So we have a yarn prep new command. It creates a checklist, and then it shows up as this local package in our gateway. We can then open that up. We can create a very simple checklist query. Check that works. Awesome. We've got something to start working off. Next up, we're going to expand this out. We've got all of our details. Boom. Perfect. We can write a query, and we've got mock data, so this is great. From there, we can just start connecting this up to the UI in Storybook. We add our query. boom, immediately we have something we can start working off. So that's just really valuable now. We can start getting actual stakeholder feedback on how this thing works. Yeah, next up we are going to actually add some data. So Mock-up provider is a little component that we plug into the composed supergraph inside of PrepStation. And this just provides us with, it's basically supergraph mocking at this point. So checklist, we're just going to return some tasks from this checklist component. We're passing in your, our resolver here. And cool, now we got some data. We've got our prep list working. Cool, okay, where do we go next with this? So we can also do mutations, obviously. We've got, each story is just a function that runs up, so we can, use it to basically store data. It doesn't refresh each time. So let's do our checklist toggle. See here, we've got a little object, basically, of tasks that we can store data in. And then inside of our story, we are going to mock our mutation. It's down here. And cool. Then we could start doing actual changing stuff, right? Which is awesome. So now this can be shared. Whenever we merge this PR, this will get pushed out to any stakeholders in the project. So anyone who's part of the Slack channel will get a message, and they'll go, "Okay, cool. Yeah, this is the product we want. This is working the way we expected." The next thing this works really well with is testing. So we can test stories, essentially. So these stories are functions. So what we do is we'll create different scenarios in our storybook, and then we will actually test those scenarios. So we just test the actual storybook story. And the great thing about that is if you've ever written a jest test, mocking is kind of horrible. Like you can end up mocking, you've mocked so much stuff sometimes that you're not sure if you're actually testing anything. And with this, you end up not actually mocking anything. It starts to look more like an integration test at this point in time, which is kind of cool because it's all kind of self-contained. Cool. I'm going to pass you over to Ruben.
Thank you, Alan. And the wonderful thing of this is that you can really have your schema, your whole supergraph, in line with your actual design and how you're designing it. Now, we are the domain team of the checklist, but there's another team that owns chefs and everything that is around it. So what we want to do is also use the power of federation within this environment. Just a show of hands, who's using federation to just get a, so we got quite a few. So when we start on building out the top section, it's just, here's the chef, we just hold a reference to the chef, and I want to show their name, and I want to show an avatar. So what I can do within my schema that we just created is just simply add the type chef with the ID there, and add the chef to my checklist. But now we started thinking, wait a minute, if every time in our UI we see a chef, wouldn't it be cool if you click on it, it could show the task list? So we're the task list or the checklist domain, so instead of having chef integrated in our checklist, we're actually going to extend chef with checklist. What that allows us to do is now in any query, because we already had a chef, give me the chef with this, is extend chef directly in my environment without having to actually push it into my schema registry, see if it's going to connect. I can do it on the fly and just run it, and without doing much further things, I can just have this available. And this is really cool because I can see it work right here, right then. I can design that schema. I didn't have to touch anything. Now, as you could see in our designs, we had an avatar. So we assumed the checklist must have, the chef service must have an avatar. So we add the avatar, but that field is actually not available. We know we have it in our database, but it's not exposed in the schema. So what this tool allows you to do is actually go and override a subgraph, any of the subgraphs that exist in our Hive project, and override it on the fly. So I could just say prep override, I choose the one that I want to override, and now in our list of subgraphs, I don't only see the local one, I can also see the one that is overridden. And what it will do, if you look on the left, it will add it to my local, in my local folder. So I can just go in and change that schema on the fly. So we're just going to go into that schema, we add the avatar, and now this schema now has, the chef is now extended with the avatar. Now obviously this is not just now the avatar is available. I'll still have to go to the chef's team and say, hey, we want this, but this is now an artifact that I can use by just extending and overriding existing subgraphs right here in my tool. And I could play around with it. I can add some mock data for it, and I can really have my whole feature live in my Storybook, getting real queries using the mock service. So once this is available in production, I don't have to go and swap things around. I can just use the same graph, the same schema, etc. Now, so when we use PrepStation, what are our benefits? We have now a UI that is already 80–90% complete. I can find out, does it have the components that I need? It's an interactive session that we could do together with the designer and the backend engineer. We have our schemas that we've built, so now it's up to the backend to just take that schema. We know it is already hooked into the UI. We have a development team with clear requirements and less cross-functional dependencies. And we have much more confidence in delivering this because we've already flushed out the unknowns and the dependencies that we might only know or only detect once we bring these things together later in the production phase. So it brings all of that much left in a very creative and fun way to work on this. And we have much more confidence in this delivery. Now you might be saying, well, this is an easy example, it's a checklist, anybody can build that. We have Matt in the room who actually works on our scheduling project. And this is an actual live example of a scheduling application that we're working on. And Matt was able to do all of this, all with mock environment, not having an actual running system. Everything is mocked out. He can use queries, he can use mutations, he can use federated types, all of that within Storybook without having to have a running service where I can, every playground, you see the month, the week, the day, these are all environments that people can play with. He can test on that using Jest Test, and he can share that with his stakeholders much earlier, and it's a very early step in the process.
Cool. So, yeah. So we talked about mise en place at the start. So this is kind of our mise en place. This is us getting prepared. You know, the second part of this process is where we go into actually developing all of the infrastructure around this. So this is like, you can think of this as in the same way in a restaurant where they will put all of this effort in at the start to make sure that when it comes time to actually do service and deliver really good, amazing food to somebody, this kind of puts us into a position where our front-end engineers, our teams, everyone knows what they're building. Everyone knows the requirements. Our front-end engineer is now in a position with 90% of his work done. He can do those last 10%. He can put when all of this infrastructure back-end work is happening, our front-end engineer can be working on, design system contributions, polish, that really detailed hard work that elevates a product up to a really high level. And that's the really important thing for us, because when we're in a very kind of linear process, front-end, UI, these are the things that get squeezed out, and the quality of our products just drops way down. So yeah, that's our little tool. And yeah, thanks again to the Guild. I think we've built so much of this on top of their excellent work. Thank you. 10 minutes. Yeah, we talk too fast. Questions? Well, like we Toast, yeah, open source POS. We'd love to. I mean, we built this to solve. This to solve internal problems. You know, well, not problems, but just to kind of streamline how we build products. And we saw a problem with how that linear process kind of forced the quality down, you know, on our front ends, and also how, you know, like my team's the design system team, so you know, it's kind of strange that I'm so interested in GraphQL, but it is to sort of, these approaches create a space where we can get design system components. So like, you know, so yeah, we would love to open source it. And if people are interested in having an open source version, yeah, we'd love to. You can, yeah. So this is where I think there's some interesting stuff we can do. We can mock at the subgraph level. So I think if you see in one of the files there, I'm not sure if I still have it, but you can, in this local folder, you can put like the name of the service, TS file, and you can export mocks and resolvers there, and that gives you mocking at the subgraph level. So you could, if you didn't want to use Storybook, you just wanted to actually mock the entire application. And I think in the later stages of...
I did that too. So
yeah.
you just ran your application in the same thing and then run it in your production, but make sure not to use the production client, the Apollo client, for example.
Yeah.
It does the exact same thing. So
Yeah. We also have a micro front-end architecture that lets us inject locally running applications into our pre-production environments, so we can kind of like, you know, develop in place. And yeah, we can use it that way too, which is kind of cool. You can kind of go, oh, here's our product running. It's nice.
It's not typed over. Technically, it's not typed.
Yeah, it's not just, yeah, that's a sort of.
Yep.
Did you guys explore integrating as like a Figma plugin, sort of taking this whole insight like even one step earlier in the process?
The thing about, like, I love the idea of doing this in Figma, but I think there's, so if it was in Figma, your designer would probably be doing that prototyping. And they might be doing that over here on their own, and then they're like, oh, I've built a prototype. There's huge value in having your front-end engineer, your designer, and your back-end engineer in this kind of really short like cycle where they're communicating, they're talking to each other, they're thinking about the schema design within the context of the application they're building. And I think, I mean, that's the thing I probably skipped over saying that. I think this is also, why this isn't, we built this first because we wanted a way for our engineers to design subgraph schemas within the context of the supergraph. Because we kind of felt like that's the hardest part, is like actually getting your domain teams who are used to, you know, developing from their domain, getting them to kind of look inwards through the supergraph. So that's kind of where we started. And then, you know, the Storybook integration just kind of makes sense at that point then, you know. Anyway.
It's also a great tool to educate the team on federation, because the whole like at key fields is, for some people that aren't used to it, it's a big leap. But by doing this, you're like, oh, here you can just extend the chef, and now it just works.
Yeah.
That kind of has been tremendously helpful
You sort of trick people into thinking that, you know, extending, or maybe, let's say if you're changing another team's domain service, or there's like a better way to organize their schema, you sort of trick them into thinking that that's going to be easy with the overrides, and you know, come up with the best solution you can before you get too caught up in avoiding cross-team collaboration, you know, which, that it's easier. Any other questions?
There wasn't a couple of presentations that was, they were speaking, it was code
Yeah, design first. That's a good way to put it.
All right.
Cool. Thank you very much.